Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 3 NFL predictions. So last week in Week 2, I had a good week going 12-4, and that brings my record on the season to 24-8. But kicking things off this week on Thursday Night Football, and we have the Dolphins at the Bills. And this is a game I really don't think is going to be that close. The Bills, they've looked great so far this year with wins over the Ravens and Jets, and the Dolphins, they've been pretty bad with a blowout loss against the Colts and then a loss to the Patriots. But on the offensive side of the ball for the Bills, they've looked really good, and so far through 2 games, they're averaging 35.5 points per game. And I think they should have another big game, as they face a really bad Dolphins defense that has allowed 33 points in both their games so far. Now, on the offensive side of things for the Dolphins, they haven't been very good, but they were a little bit better last week, scoring 27 points. But they now have to face a great Bills defense. And on top of the Dolphins' offense already not being great, Tua has not played well against the Bills in his career, as in 9 career games against the Bills, Tua has thrown 9 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. But this is a game I really don't think is going to be that close. The Bills, they're the much better team, they're at home, and they've also owned the Dolphins as of late, winning 6 straight and 12 of the last 14, but I've got the Bills dominated and winning by a score of 34-13. Moving to the games on Sunday, beginning with the Packers at the Browns. And this is another game that I really don't think is going to be that good. The Packers, they've been great so far this year and look like they might be the best team in the NFL. And they don't face one of the worst teams in the NFL in the Browns. Now, the Packers offense, they've been great, scoring 27 points per game. And they face a Browns defense that's okay, although allowed 41 last week to the Ravens. Then on the flip side, the Browns offense just is not going to do much against the great Packers defense, nor are they going to keep up with the Packers offense. Well, I really don't think this game is going to be that close. I've got the Packers winning easily 31-10. Next game, we have the Colts at the Titans. So this is an interesting game, as we have the Colts who have looked really good this year sitting at 2-0, and they face the Titans who are 0-2, although they have been pretty solid. And I think this could be a tricky game for the Colts. But the Colts offense, they've looked really good, and Daniel Jones is second in the NFL in passing yards. But the Colts offense, they face a Titans defense that is pretty solid, although they have given up some points, allowing 26.5 points per game. Then for the Titans, their offense has not been very good with 31 points in their 2 games combined, although Cam Ward has looked pretty solid. But Ward and the Titans offense, they face a Colts defense that is okay, and they're not great, but not terrible. But this is a game where I could see the upset, especially because the Titans are at home. I still don't completely trust the Colts, and I think Cam Ward and the Titans are only going to get better as the season progresses. So I can definitely see the upset here, but I'm going to take the Colts to get the win. I think they're the better overall team, and even though they're on the road, I still think they'll get the win. I've got the Colts in a somewhat close game. I think they'll pull away at the end. I've got the Colts 28-19. Up next, we got the Bengals at the Vikings. So this is the game that is really interesting because both these teams are playing with backup quarterbacks. The Bengals, they're going to be starting Jake Browning, with Joe Burrow missing about 3 months with a toe injury. And for the Vikings, Carson Wentz is going to be making the start, with J.J. McCarthy missing some time with an ankle injury. But on the offensive side of things for the Bengals, their offense is definitely going to take a step back without Joe Burrow. But I still think this offense is going to be pretty solid with Jake Browning. Because Browning is a very good backup quarterback, and we saw what he can do in 2023. When he made 7 starts for the Bengals, went 4-3, and in those 7 starts, averaged 266 passing yards per game, had 14 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So I still think this Bengals offense is going to be pretty solid. Although, I do think they could have a tough time this week because this Vikings defense is really good. Now, on the other side, the Vikings offense already hasn't been that good, so I don't really know how much worse they're going to be with Carson Wentz, because I don't really think you can get much worse. But the area I do worry about this Vikings offense is up front, because Wentz is not nearly as mobile as J.J. McCarthy, and McCarthy has already taken 9 sacks, which is second most in the NFL. So I think that could be a problem. Plus, the Vikings, they face a Bengals defense that's obviously got Trey Hendrickson, who's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But this is a tough game to predict, and these are 2 pretty similar teams at this point in the season. And I think the Vikings are the better overall team because of their defense, but I also trust Jake Browning a lot more than I trust Carson Wentz. So I really have no idea who to take here. But this game is pretty much a coin flip. I am going to take the Vikings because they're at home and because of their defense, but this game is pretty much 50-50. But I've got the Vikings in a close one, 24-21. Up next, we got the Steelers at the Patriots. So this is another interesting game. The Steelers, they're 1-1 after their loss to the Seahawks, And the Patriots, they're also 1-1, although they beat the Dolphins last week. But the Patriots offense, they looked good last week, putting up 33 points, and that is actually the first time they scored 30 points since week 6 of the 2022 season. And I definitely think there's a chance the Patriots can continue to play well offensively, because they face the Steelers defense that is supposed to be good, although the Steelers, they've allowed over 30 points in both their games so far. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Steelers, they looked great in week 1, and Aaron Rodgers threw 4 touchdowns, but they didn't look too good last week. And overall in the year, they're scoring 25.5 points per game. And the Steelers offense, they match up against a solid Patriots defense that, to this point, is allowing 23.5 points per game. Now, the Patriots, they have actually been really bad against the pass, allowing over 300 passing yards in both games this season, so I could see Aaron Rodgers having a big game. But this is another tough game to predict because both these teams have been okay so far this year, but nothing too crazy. Well, I'm going to take the Steelers to get the win for a couple reasons. One, I think Aaron Rodgers has a big game against a pass defense that has struggled. And the second reason is I think TJ Watt and the Steelers pass rush have a big game against a Patriots offensive line that, yes, is better than last season, but it's still not great. So, I've got the Steelers with the win. I do think this will be a close game and a lower scoring game, but I do have the Steelers 21-17. Moving on, we have the Rams at the Eagles. So this is a playoff rematch from last season, and this should be a pretty good game. The Rams, they're 2-0 with wins over the Texans and Titans, and the Eagles, they're also 2-0, and last week they beat the Chiefs. But on the offensive side of things for the Rams, they've played pretty well, and last week they were good, putting up 33 points. But they now match up against an Eagles defense that is one of the better defenses in the NFL, and so far this year, they're allowing an average of 18.5 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the Eagles' offense has been okay, as they're scoring 22 points per game, and they're running the ball well, rushing for 140 yards per game, but their pass game has not been good, as they're averaging just 119 passing yards per game, and that is second worst in the NFL. And the Eagles' offense, they face a Rams defense that is actually the best scoring defense in the NFL through 2 weeks, as they're allowing just 14 points per game. And the Rams defense is also the 4th best defense against the pass, although they're pretty average against the run, so I could see Saquon Barkley having a big game. And that was a big problem for the Rams in the playoff game, because the Rams, they could not stop Saquon as he ran for over 200 yards. But this is a game that can definitely go either way, but I think this is going to be a low-scoring defensive game, as both these teams are very good on the defensive side of the ball. Now, the Rams do have the better numbers defensively, as well as offensively, but I'm going to take the Eagles to get the win. I think they'll be able to run the ball fairly effectively, and I think Jalen Hurts will do just enough as a passer, just like what he's done in the first couple games. Now, I can see the Rams getting the win, especially if they can force the Eagles into obvious passing situations, where then you're forcing Jalen Hurts to throw the ball against a great pass defense, and you're also letting your great pass rush go to work. But this is a game that can definitely go either way. I would like to see the Rams win this game, but I'm going to take the Eagles by a score of 19-13. Next game, we have the Jets at the Buccaneers. So the Buccaneers, they've looked great so far this year as they're 2-0, and this is actually their 5th straight season where they've started 2-0. But the interesting thing is, while they've started 2-0 each of the last 5 years, they've lost their 3rd game 4 years in a row, and have not started 3-0 since I believe 2009. But I think the Buccaneers have a good chance to break that streak, because they face a Jets team that hasn't been great so far this year. On the offensive side of the ball for the Buccaneers, they've played really well, and I could see them having another big game, as they face a Jets defense that has not been very good, allowing at least 30 points in each of their 2 games so far. Although, it is interesting because this Jets defense is supposed to be pretty good. Now, offense for the Jets, they were great in week 1, awful last week, and now see what they are here in week 3. But they will be starting their backup quarterback Tyrod Taylor, as Justin Fields is out with a concussion. But Tyrod Taylor, he should be helped out by a pretty solid Jets run game that currently sits 6th in the NFL through 2 weeks. But Tyrod Taylor and the Jets offense, they face the Buccaneers defense that has done a great job stopping the run so far this year. But overall, I think this could be a close game, but I've got the Buccaneers getting the win. I just think they're the better overall team. They're at home, and I just think the Buccaneers, they have a good offensive game. I don't really see the Jets doing a ton offensively. I've got the Jets by a score of 27-13. Up next, we've got the Commanders at the Raiders. So this is a game where both these teams are 1-1, and looking to bounce back after rough losses last week. And this is also another game where we might see a backup quarterback at the start, as Jaden Daniels is currently dealing with a knee sprain, and if he can't go, then Marcus Mariota will get the start for the Commanders. But the Commanders' offense, they've been pretty solid so far this year, although they weren't great last week. And they'll face a Raiders defense that have played pretty well, although they've struggled to stop the pass. Now, on the other side, the Raiders, they've been decent offensively. They've thrown the ball a lot, and it's really dependent on Geno Smith. If he throws for 300 yards like he did in week 1, chances are they'll win. But if he throws for 3 picks like last week, he's very likely to lose. But the Raiders' offense, they faced the Commanders' defense that has been pretty solid to this point. But this is a game that I could see going either way, especially with Jayden Daniels battling an injury. But even if Jayden Daniels doesn't end up playing, I'm still fairly confident in the Commanders, because we've seen Marcus Mariota play in this offense at a pretty high level. So I'm going to take the Commanders in a close game 23-19, but this game could go either way. Up next, we've got the Falcons at the Panthers. So the Panthers, they're 0-2 with losses to the Jaguars and Cardinals, and the Falcons, they picked up their first win of the season last week as they beat the Vikings. Now in that game, the Falcons offense did not play that well, but the Falcons, they have a great opportunity to really get the offense going as they face a bad Panthers defense that is allowing nearly 27 points per game. Now the Panthers offense, they've been okay, and they put up 19 points in the second half of last week's game, so maybe they can carry that over into this week, although that could be tough because the Falcons defense was great last week, allowing just 6 points. Well, I'm going to take the Falcons to get the win here. I think their offense bounces back and plays well against a bad defense. I think their defense continues to play well, and I've got the Falcons with the win by a score of 26-16. Moving on, we have the Texans at the Jaguars. So this is a big game for the Texans because they're already 0-2, and they desperately need to avoid an 0-3 start. But it could be tough because they face a Jaguars team that they've been okay, and they're sitting at 1-1. But on the offensive side of the ball for the Texans, they have not been good, and they're actually the worst scoring offense in the NFL through 2 weeks, scoring just 14 points per game. And they match up against a Jaguars defense that has been solid. Now on the flip side, the Jaguars offense has played pretty well, scoring 26.5 points per game, but they get a really tough matchup as they face an elite Texans defense. Now, I really have no idea which way this game's going to go. I'm going to lean the Texans because they've got the better defense, and it's pretty much a must-win game despite it being really early in the season. And even though the Texans offense hasn't been great, I think their defense is going to be able to keep this low scoring. I think the Texans offense does enough, and I've got the Texans with the win, 17-14. Moving on, we have the Broncos at the Chargers. So this is a big game. The Chargers, they've looked good so far, and they're 2-0, and the Broncos are okay, and they're currently sitting at 1-1. But the Broncos, they really need to avoid the 1-2 start, especially playing in a hard division, plus they're supposed to be pretty good. But this is a really interesting matchup. The Chargers offense, they've been good, scoring 23.5 points per game, and they've thrown the ball really effectively, and Justin Herbert is currently third in the NFL with 560 passing yards. But Herbert and the Chargers offense, they face a Broncos defense that is great, especially in the secondary. Although, the Broncos defense didn't play that well last week, allowing 29 points and over 300 passing yards to Daniel Jones and the Colts. Now, on the flip side, the Broncos offense has not been very good so far this year, and quarterback Bo Nix has struggled with 3 interceptions in 2 games. And while the Broncos offense hasn't been good, they now face a Chargers defense that's been great, and they're actually third in the NFL, allowing 15 points per game. Although the Chargers will be without Khalil Mack, who's out with an elbow injury. But this is a really interesting game, and a good match between 2 good teams in the AFC West. And this is a game that can definitely go either way. Both these teams are really good defensively, so I think we could see a lower scoring game, but at the same time, both these offenses are capable of scoring points. Well, I think this game comes down to how the Broncos defense looks against the pass, and if they can stop Justin Herbert. Because if Justin Herbert has another big game, I like the Chargers' chances. But, I mean, this is a game that can definitely go either way. The Chargers, they've looked like the slightly better team so far. Their defense is great. Justin Herbert's thrown the ball really well. I think that could continue. And I've got the Chargers with the win by a score of 24-20. Up next, we've got the Saints at the Seahawks. So the Seahawks, they looked pretty good last week, and they got their first win of the season as they beat the Steelers. And they faced the Saints, who aren't very good, and they're 0-2, although they've been fairly competitive in both games so far. Now, the Saints offense, they haven't been great, scoring 17 points per game, but they faced the Seahawks defense that's actually looked pretty good, as they're allowing just 17 points per game. Now, the Seahawks offense really got going last week with 31 points, and Sam Darnold played pretty well, throwing for nearly 300 yards, and I think that could continue, because the Saints defense hasn't exactly been great. Now, they haven't been terrible, but they're not exactly the best defense in the NFL. But I have the Seahawks with the win here. They're at home. They're the better team. Saints just aren't very good. I've got the Seahawks with the win by a score of 26-17. Moving on, we have the Cowboys at the Bears. So this is an interesting game, and this should be pretty fun, because I think this game should be pretty high scored. Both these teams aren't very good defensively, and really struggled last week, as the Cowboys, they allowed 37 to the Giants, and the Bears just allowed 52 to the Lions. And while the defenses aren't great, both these offenses are pretty good. As the Cowboys, they scored 40 last week, and they're averaging 30 points a game on the season. And the Bears offense doesn't have insanely impressive numbers, but I think they should be able to have a good game against a bad defense. But I think this game is going to be a shootout. I do think the Cowboys have the better offense, but I also think the Bears have the better defense. Now, the Bears are home, and I definitely think they could get the win, but I'm going to trust Dak Prescott to outplay Caleb Williams, and I've got the Cowboys with the win by a score of 34-27, but game, I think it's going to be very high scoring, can definitely go either way. Up next, we have the Cardinals at the 49ers. So both these teams have gotten off to great starts this year as they're 2-0, and this should be a pretty interesting game. The 49ers, they beat the Saints last week with Mac Jones as their starting quarterback, and he actually had a really good game, as he threw for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. And there's definitely a chance that Mac Jones is the starter once again, with Brock Purdy still dealing with an injury, although there is a chance Purdy does play. But whoever the quarterback is for the 49ers, they get to face a Cardinals defense that has gotten off to a good start this year, along about 17 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the Cardinals offense has been pretty good, as they're scoring 23 points a game, and Kyler Murray's played pretty well. But while the Cardinals offense has been good, the 49ers defense has also looked very good so far this year, as they've allowed 13 points in week 1 and 21 points last week. But this is another game that can definitely go either way. I can see the Cardinals getting the win because they've looked pretty good, and I don't necessarily trust Mac Jones at the quarterback spot, but at the same time, I think the 49ers defense can do enough, and as long as Jones just doesn't have a bad game, I can see the 49ers getting the win. But this is a very close game, but I'm going to take the 49ers. They're at home. I think their defense controls this game, and I've got the 49ers in a close one, 21-20. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, we have the Chiefs at the Giants. And we'll have a live watch party for this game that will start at about 8:15 Eastern Time on Sunday, so I hope to see you guys there. But this is a huge game for the Chiefs, because they're currently 0-2, and they desperately need to avoid going 0-3, because just 2.5% of teams who start 0-3 make the playoffs. Now, the Chiefs, they do have a good opportunity to get their first win of the season, because they play the Giants. And while the Giants, they are 0-2, they looked pretty good last week. And the Giants offense, they played really well last week, putting up 37 points, and Russell Wilson threw for 450 yards. And I think there's a chance Russ and the Giants offense have another big game, because the Chiefs defense allowed over 300 passing yards to the Chargers in week 1. Now, they only allowed about 100 last week against the Eagles, but that's just because the Eagles don't throw the ball downfield. Now, on the flip side, the Chiefs offense has been okay. Patrick Mahomes has played well, but the rest of the offense has been pretty bad. And the Chiefs offense, they faced the Giants defense that is solid, although they did struggle last week, allowing 40 points. But this is a game where the upset is definitely a possibility. I would not be shocked at all to see the Giants get the win. And obviously, as a Giants fan, I'd love to see the Giants upset the Chiefs. But I'm going to take the Chiefs to get the win. I think they're going to be extremely motivated to win this game, not want to start 0-3. And they're just a better overall team. And I've got the Chiefs in a close one, 24-20. And our final game, we've got the Lions at the Ravens on Monday Night Football. And we will have a live watch party for this game starting about 8:15 Eastern Time on Monday. So again, I hope to see you guys there. But this should be a great game. And this was actually my preseason Super Bowl prediction. And I still think we have a good chance of seeing this game in Super Bowl 60. But this should be a really fun game. Offensively for these teams, they're both elite. The Ravens, they've scored 40 points in both their games this season. And the Lions, they just dropped 52 on the Bears. And then defensively for both teams, they've gone off to kind of rough starts, but both these defenses are pretty solid. But I think this game is going to be really fun. Looking a little deeper, Jared Goff threw for 334 yards and 5 touchdowns last week, and I think we could see him put up big numbers once again, as he faces a Ravens defense that has allowed the second most passing yards through 2 weeks. And then for the Ravens offense, they've run the ball really effectively so far this year, and I could see them doing that once again, because the Lions' run defense isn't terrible, but they're also not great. But this is a game that I think is going to be a high-scoring, close game, and a game that could really go either way. The Ravens, they're at home, and I think their defense is a little bit better, so I would lean towards them, but I also trust the Lions a little bit more in a close game. especially after what we saw with the Ravens in Week 1. And the numbers actually back that up. As since the start of last season, the Lions are 7-2 in one-score games, while the Ravens are 5-7. But this is a game that can definitely go their way, and even while I don't trust the Ravens as much as I would trust the Lions in a close game, I'm going to take them to get the win. I think their defense could come up with a big stop here and there, and they're also at home, so I've got the Ravens in a shootout, 35-34. But, obviously, as I said a million times, a game that can definitely go their way. But those are my Week 3 NFL predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think wins some of this week's big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.